Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us and who are going to be joining us. We've had a great amount of interest in this session, and a lot of our viewers have said that they will be joining us through the course of the evening and catching this episode next. But let me quickly give you a background of what we are trying to do here. 19th of November marks the beginning of World Heritage Week. It's a time when the world celebrates and iterates the importance of our great heritage sites. And in India, of course, 364 days of the year, we are complaining about the way our heritage is. So this time we decided to put the spotlight on something that is turning out to be a very big crowd puller. The lovely trail along the route that the Buddha's life took him through, from the place he was born to the place where he attained Mahaparinirvana, and of course, all the sites that are associated with the Buddha. So today we have a rare opportunity of looking at this in three perspectives. Joining us is archaeologist and cultural anthropologist, Kurush Dalal, who's a consulting editor with Live History India, and one of the pioneers of India's heritage movement, Debashish Nayak, who was the man responsible for getting Ahmedabad on the World Heritage City list, and has done phenomenal work over the last 3 decades around the theme of heritage. So how we are looking at this is really in two ways. One, we are going to be telling you, and Kurush is going to be taking us through the sites associated with the Buddha, the history of it, how they were discovered, and how these great events of the Buddha's life have been represented through art. Debashish is also going to be taking us through this wonderful itinerary of a tour that they are planning. We are doing this in association with Uniglobe, which is a agency travel company from Ahmedabad, and they do these very curated tours to very interesting places, and a lot of thought goes behind these tours. And Debashish is leading this tour on tracing the footsteps of the Buddha. That's scheduled from the 11th of December. And for all our viewers over here watching this show, you can be part of this exclusive tour. All you have to do is drop in a line to me on the Live History India Circle mail ID, and we will get you a lot on details on this so that you can be part of it. So let's start our journey. It's a journey that many people have taken, from Ashoka himself, the modern emperor, to all the Chinese pilgrims from Fahan to Hunsang. And this is the most documented journeys, really, but it's also a story of great discovery. But before we get Kurush to start on this exciting journey, let me quickly go across to Debashish and ask him. Debashish, as I was mentioning, 364 days of the year, we are complaining about the way our heritage is. But this is one example where it's really worked well, because such a lot of the global interest is there in this tour. How have you seen it evolve very quickly?
Thank you, Mini, and wish all of you for the beginning of the World Heritage Week today. I feel that Buddha pilgrim tour or walk or journey has been there for centuries, and people have been discovering it, traveling through from also for many centuries. But while the pilgrims has this purpose, a very devotional way of going through the whole journey, retracing the path of Buddha, but I felt as an architect and art conservation person that it really needs a proper interpretation, because which I'm going to talk later, part of the program, where you feel that all the art form, like the depository of this beautiful art form like Sanchi or Ajanta or Gandhara or Bharhut or Amravati, these are the depository of these art forms, and those art forms actually talking about the life of Buddha. So when you actually visit Bodh Gaya or the Shravasti or Vaishali or Kapilavastu or Lumbini, there you can actually connect with the art form which represent those incidents. For example, like when Buddha, after his enlightenment, he spends 7 weeks around Bodh Gaya temple, that area. Temple was not there. So, but today, if you visit the place, you don't really know what actually happened. So similarly, if you go to Sravasti, you feel that the miracle happened. If you go to Ajanta cave and the painting cave number 1, you'll see that incident is documented. Also in Gandhara sculpture, also in the Jethavana incident, the Anath Pinda doing the coins spread out on the Jethavana to purchase it. Those are depicted in various stupas or monuments. So I feel that if you can particularly curate and pinpoint those particular achievement and the art form, that will definitely add a very different value, and also we should be able to preserve them and identify them, and also use it as a part of our education system.
Right, right. Kurush, let's venture into this journey. These are places that we're all familiar with. Anybody who studied history is familiar with this route. But it is, what's amazed me always is that this route, part of it was also rediscovered, because there was this period where we had almost lost this heritage, even the knowledge of all of these places, and then it was rediscovered really in the 19th century actually. So let's start with the journey, and it's over to you.
Welcome everybody. Thank you LHI and Mini, and of course Devashish, for being here and having me here with you all. It is Heritage Week today onwards, and it's a great way to kick this off, and LHI of course does such fascinating things like this. This map, very inadequate in its own way, tells us about the main locations that deal with the life and the times of the Buddha. Probably one of India's most famous sons, if not the most famous son. The story of the Buddha was a fabulous story, a fascinating story. It becomes part legend, part myth. It starts off as a philosophy. It becomes a religion. Within the period of his life itself, North India changes. There is so much happening in this period between the 6th and the 5th century BC. A period of great change, a period of great upheaval, a period where the very foundations of India are being laid. And yet we lost all of this till perhaps, say, sometime around the 10th, 11th century AD, when Buddhism declined. We lost our memories of all of this in most cases. And it was only thanks to the British that we revived this. In 1861, Alexander Cunningham decided, after reading Yun Sang, to set out on his footsteps to find all those places that the great Yun Sang had spoken about as being there in the 7th century AD, already the decline phase of Buddhism, when he had traveled through North India, the Deccan, and ultimately through the Northwest Frontier Province. Cunningham was followed soon after by Sir John Marshall, who strengthened this entire case. Most of the sites that we had lost were found once again. Many of the great centers, we had no clue what they were called today. Their old names had lapsed. And our story essentially starts at this very, very interesting place in Nepal called Lumbini. Lumbini is where the Buddha was, well, conceived, if you'd like to call it that, where the Buddha became aware, and where we become aware for the first time of the Buddha. His mother, Queen Maya, is at Lumbini with her women folk from her palace. And Lumbini is supposed to have these very beautiful bathing ponds. And at night, she dreams that a beautiful white elephant enters her womb. And this signifies the beginning of the story of a young prince of a small state in northern India, the Shaka state, ruled from its capital, Kapilavastu, and whose young prince was born as Gautama the Buddha. So we talk about Kapilavastu, and Kapilavastu, Sushmita, can we have the next slide? It's a very, very intriguingly interesting place. There is a lot of debate as to where it is. We jokingly say that there is an Indian Kapilavastu and there is a Nepalese Kapilavastu. And there are two sites which vie for this. I won't go into the details of that because that's a highly political thing. But suffice to say, in the city of the Shakas, of Kapila Vastu, Gautama was born. And when he was born, the omens were read. And it was said that he would either be a great emperor in his own right, a great conqueror, or he would be a great bhikshu. His father was really scared of this and shielded him from everything that had to do with being human. So he grew up not knowing pain, not knowing death, not knowing illness. And then in his youth, married and very happily living in the palace with his wife and son, in a rapid succession, he was virtually slapped in the face with the point that there was this concept of old age, there was a concept of death, there was a concept of illness, there was a concept of maiming, and all these things, all the real world, which was full of so much pain, which had been hidden from him, kind of slapped him again and again in the face. And he finally decided to give it all up. And he left his city. On the right-hand side, you see a beautiful image of the great departure. And that's the prince leaving. That horse in front that you see signifies the Buddha, and that's from Sanchi. And that is the Buddha basically leaving Kapila Vastu and the whole of Kapila Vastu's great sorrow. In actuality, he sneaks out in the night because he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He spends many, many years trying to find the answer to this pain that the world is full of. And he tries all kinds of things. He forces all kinds of trials and tribulations upon himself. He lives the life of a very, very austere ascetic. And despite all of this, nothing, absolutely nothing seems to give him solace of any kind. There is no answer. And then finally, at this place called Bodh Gaya, which is in Bihar today, meditating under a Bodhi tree, he finally achieves what we call Nibbana. He realizes that it is not extreme joy and extreme pleasure and hedonism, neither it is extreme asceticism, which is the way to salvation. But there is a middle path. And this middle path is required to be taken so that one does not any longer continuously have desire, which leads to actions which accumulate karma, and which causes you to be born again and again into this continuous, endless circle of suffering. So on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, you have two images of Bodh Gaya from the early period. The left is from Sanchi, beautifully carved, the Bodhi tree, and the Vajrasana under it. On the right-hand side from the Bharut caves, again, the Bharut Stupa, again the Bodhi tree and the Vajrasana under it. Surprisingly, we've actually found this actual Vajrasana, which was donated by Ashoka Maurya, at the base of the Bodhi tree that you see above on the right-hand side. The Bodhi tree has at various times been destroyed. It has been hacked. It has died due to natural causes. But babies from this beautiful ficus have always been kept sacred and have always been there as a standby. In the 1870s, when Alexander Cunningham actually rediscovered Bodh Gaya, and he carried out a vast amount of excavation and conservation at Bodh Gaya, he realized the Bodhi tree was ill. So the current Bodhi tree that you see flourishing so beautifully over here is actually a Bodhi tree replanted by Sir Alexander Cunningham himself in the 19th century. So from here, our story takes off. The newly enlightened Buddha is now bursting to share this route to salvation that he has. And he arrives at Sarnath on the outskirts of Benares. And here at Sarnath, he gives his first great sermon, as it's called, the Sermon in the Deer Park. That stupa that you see on the extreme right-hand side is essentially commemorating this event. And according to many of our writers, scholars, art historians, this marks the actual spot on which the Buddha was sitting when he delivered that sermon. Again, excavations here conducted both by Cunningham and then by Marshall revealed some amazing artifacts, some amazing sculpture, and the very, very famous icon which represents India today, the four-lion capital of Ashoka Maurya, was discovered here at Sarnath for the first time. And that's an actual picture in the center of what it looked like during the excavations when this find was first made. And it basically, in one single piece of sculpture that stood on the top of a very, very long, tall, beautifully polished sandstone pillar originally, tells us the entire story of the Buddha's life. On the abacus, you have the elephant representing his conception. You have a bull representing his birth. His moon sign was Rishabh, Taurus. You have the horse representing the fact that he was a Kshatriya. And you have the lion, which tells you he was from a royal family. But on top of it, you have 4 lions roaring with their mouths open to the 4 directions. Surmounting this was a beautiful wheel, a 24-spoked wheel of Dhamma. And to the 4 directions, they cry out the Dhamma of the Buddha. From here, the Buddha just kind of blitzkrieg through the whole of North India. He went from location to location, performing miracles, giving sermons. This is the famous site of Shravasti. In the center bottom image, you see the Gandha Kutir. Again, a very, very important place where the Buddha spent a night, and which is supposed to be permeated with the perfume of the Buddha himself. On the left-hand side, you see the famous miracle of Shravasti, when people refused to believe that he really had the answers. Fire grew from his shoulders, water flowed from his feet simultaneously, and he levitated above the people. So Shravasti is one of the most important places where the Buddha actually reveals himself, and of course has become part of the mythology and the lore of Buddhism. Perhaps one of the littlest known places in the legend of the Buddha is the site of Shravasti. It's also the only place where we have an elephant capital of Ashoka Maurya. You see the elephant capital on the right-hand side. This is the site of Sankisa. Sankisa is very important to Buddhism because in Buddhist mythology, you have the 3 great ladders of gold and silver and jewels, or gold and silver and ivory reaching up to the heavens. And it is on this ladder that Buddha ascends to heaven and then descends after preaching his sermon to the gods themselves. So this is the final kind of, vindication that Buddha had found what nobody else had found before. He had found the path to salvation itself, and he even preached the salvation to the gods. Perhaps another critically important place, as far as we are concerned, is the site of Vaishali. That's a beautiful Ashokan pillar with the capital standing tall at Vaishali. On the bottom left-hand side, you have all the little votive stupas of various important Buddhist monks. The Vaishali stupa is the only stupa where the relics, the original relics of the Buddha, have been excavated by us and are presently kept in the Bihar Museum at Patna. And whilst there are other places which claim to have the relics of the Buddha, it is only at Vaishali that we have the untouched remains of the Buddha neatly placed in the stupa here, making Vaishali perhaps a huge focus of Buddhists from all over the world. There were many, many great kings in this time and age. One of the great dynasties that started the dynastic succession in India during this period was the Naga dynasty. And the Naga dynasty ruled out of the capital of Rajagriha. Rajagriha has cyclopean walls. It is awe-inspiring to go there and see walls that are 2,600 years old, standing even today. The dynasty started by Bimbisara, who was followed by his son Ajatashatru. Okay, and there's Bimbisara with his wife at the center, offering worship to the Buddha. Bimbisara and Ajatashatru were great scions of this dynasty and both personal friends of the Buddha himself. The Buddha spent many years performing Varshavas, as it was called, at Rajagriha, where he stayed at the Vulture's Peak Monastery. Varshavas was that time of the year during the monsoons, when the continuously wandering Buddhist monks were allowed to stay under a roof for more than 2 nights in a row. It was a very, very important thing because with heavy rains, much heavier than we see today, and no protection like we have today, that was an incredibly dangerous period. So the Vulture's Peak is a very, very interesting location, revered not just by the Buddhists, but also by kind of their parallel religionists the Jains, and the Mahavira and the Buddha both existed simultaneously in northern India at the same time. And they obviously had incredibly good itinerary managers, because not even once did their paths ever cross, though they lived and preached together at the same time. Pataliputra was the subsequent capital of the Naga dynasty, and then subsequently the Shishunagas and the Nandas, the mighty Nandas who, well, scared Alexander's armies from crossing beyond the Jhelum into the Indian peninsula. And ultimately, of course, the capital of the Mauryas under Chandragupta, Bindusara, Ashoka, and his Kayans. And the story of Pataliputra is that it is the Buddha who first foretold the greatness of Pataliputra as he crossed over the river Ganga at Pataliputra, and he looked at the small village of Patali and said that it was destined for greatness. After wandering for many years, the Buddha, finally having achieved what he had to, had a large number of very, very important Buddhist monks now spreading his Dhamma. At the age of 80, he arrived late in the evening at the site of Kushinagar. He had imbibed a meal that did not agree with him. He was almost completely alone, with the exception of Ananda, his most favorite and first disciple. When the Buddha finally lay down and gave up his earthly bonds and achieved what we call Mahaparinirvana. So that's the Mahaparinirvana image from the Gupta era in that beautiful temple, which is called the Mahaparinirvana temple, or the temple of the great departure at Kushinagar. On the right-hand side is the great burial mound, what should be considered the first great Buddhist stupa, the stupa of Kushinagar. And it almost, well, there was a chance that it would have been the only stupa, was a chance that there would have been no stupas, because the king of Kushinagar decided that the remnants of the Buddha were his, since the Buddha had died in his lands. You see, the Buddha passed away, and Ananda sent out word to his dearest disciples, including the great Moggallana, to assemble together for the master's last rites. In the meantime, the king of Kushinagar decided that he was going to keep the master's relics only for himself. Rulers of various nation states brought their armies. You can see this beautiful panel at the bottom of this image that we're showing you today, where armies from all over the world, as in northern India at that time, have come charging to the gates of Kushinagar, and there is a battle in progress. The battle is finally halted. It is decided that the Buddha's remains will be portioned out amongst the 8 rulers, the 7 rulers who have come here, and the ruler of Kushinagar himself. A Brahmin called Drona actually performs the last rites of the Buddha, and then his asthi are divided into 8 portions. And the 9th portion is that potsherd which Drone uses to separate the various portions of the asthi itself. And since it has separated the ashes of the Buddha and is now coated in the ashes of the Buddha, this also becomes one of what is called the Sharirika remains of the Buddha, and 9 great stupas are erected on these remains. Of these, of course, there are 8 great stupas to most people. The Pataliputra stupa, Komsi, Komsa, some believe is one of the original 8, some believe is not. But the stupas were also lost to us for a long time. And it is only one by one that we have managed to identify them. The last is the Alakappa stupa of the Bullies. We have still to find where it was. It is still a great enigma. But 7 of the great 8 stupas and the Pataliputra stupa location have all been found by us and are very, very important pilgrimage spots for Buddhists, because this is where the relics of the Buddha lie. In 273 BC or 72 BC, you can argue till the cows come home. One of the greatest monarchs who ever ruled India came to power in northern India. His name was Ashoka Maurya. Ashoka Maurya united what was left from the conquest of his grandfather and his father and created an almost contiguous India from Kashmir to Mysore and from the Assam borderlands all the way into northwest frontier province and the Iranian borderlands. This mighty empire of Ashoka was forged through fire and steel. And there are various very interesting stories about how Ashoka finally gave up his wild ways of conquest and embraced the Dhamma of the Buddha. So Ashoka and his wife, as they're shown over here in a number of images that you see in the bottom row, and Ashoka then went on to propagate the Dhamma of the Buddha or the Dharma of the Buddha, and he erected a vast number of beautiful edicts, inscriptions, which are the very basis, the start of actual written Indian history, where he talked about the laws that he had put together. He talked about how people should live with each other. And these are the oldest continuously surviving actual writings that make up Indian history for us today. So right from the birth of the Buddha till the coming of Ashoka, and then subsequently the stupas that were enlarged, Ashoka Maurya broke into 8 out of 9 of the great stupas. The only one that he didn't break into was the stupa of the Nagas, the Ramagrama stupa. You can read the LHI article on this. And he redistributed the ashes into a large number of new stupas that he created across the length and breadth of northern and central India, including Sanchi. So these places became more prominent. Buddhism became a much, much stronger faith. And we have so many more relics of Buddhism that continue all the way into Bengal in the 11th century AD under the Palas. So all of this enormous legacy of art, history, archaeology, the various pilgrims who came here is perhaps the greatest single collection of heritage forged due to the events of one person's life in the whole of India.
Right. Before we get Devashish on the tour part of it, Kurush, I what has always fascinated me about this clutch of sites and the Buddha's life itself has been two things. That I think the greatest marketeer for Buddhism and Buddha's own stories was, of course, Ashoka, who kind of used him as a symbol for all the messaging that he had to do. But the second was the fact that people don't realize that from the time he got enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, he lived a long life and he traveled extensively, because it was said that you couldn't stay for more than 2 days unless it was the Varsha Masa, which is the rainy season where, monks of the Buddhist order could live in one place. And that's why you have references to him spending time in a Rajgir, during the monsoon months. But on the whole, he is said to have traveled extensively. He lived to a ripe old age. And at some point, his younger contemporary, Mahavira, would have also crossed paths. So, I mean, I always imagine what it would have been like at that time with these monks.
I tell you, I still remember one of my friends telling me that they must have had the greatest tour managers ever to make sure that their paths never crossed. Because neither the Jains nor the Buddhists ever mentioned Mahavira and the Buddha actually ever meeting. Though there are instances of Buddhist and Jain monks bickering with each other, disagreeing with each other, crossing paths, both of the great stalwarts. And the Buddha lived to 80, which at that time, Mini was like, living to 120 today. It was unimaginable to live that long a life. So that long and prosperous a life, so many comings and goings across northern India. And if you have it in today's mythology of Buddhism, he went to Sri Lanka and he went to Bamiyan and he went to Burma. Well,
and he's supposed to have come to Sopara also, very close to Mumbai, which we don't know whether he did. But it is amazing because I remember shooting in Champa in near Bhagalpur. And there's this little river crossing over there where they claim, at least the locals believe, that there was a Buddhist council of the time of the Buddha over there. What is also interesting about the Buddha is that he identified some of these places as must-go pilgrim centers, in a sense also giving a spiritual geography to the faith.
Very much. In fact, he is supposed to have said to Ananda that let me be venerated at 4 places. The place I was born, the place I died, the place I achieved Nibbana, and the place where I gave my first sermon. So he only talked about 4 centers in his memory. But you know what happens when there's a great man with a great memory? Everybody wants a share of his legacy.
Right. Devashish, even today, people are following the path that that the Buddha took, and so much is happening around that. I remember you telling me about how Bodh Gaya and the Rajgir stretch has become a congregation point for monks and scholars to come and also be part of large congregations where they remember the Buddha and the faith. So let's come down to the tour. So this is the more academic part, the story of the Buddha and the rediscovery of his sites. But now what we are coming to is the actual tour that Devashish is going to be leading, starting, of course, on the 11th of December from Bodh Gaya. So why don't you take us through, Devashish, how you have curated this?
Thank you, Mine. And let's go through this journey of rediscovering Buddhism. When I started going to Bodh Gaya, I was there as a child, but later when I actually went to Bodh Gaya, I found almost nearly 7,000 monks been doing the chanting ceremony at just below the Bodhi tree. So I was curious that who they are. Then we discovered that they are from the Light of Buddha Dharma Foundation International, based in California. They organized now almost 17 years to bring these monks from Buddhist monks from across the world to come and chant in Bodh Gaya. But then they realized that when I was working with Navanananda University, we realized that that whole area, the name Bihar itself came from the Buddhist Bihara. And then how people should experience this Buddha's footsteps along this whole region, which have been traveling for so many years. So we thought that there's a village called. So we discovered that let's do this journey, starting from Bodh Gaya to Rajgir, to Nalanda, and to Patna. I mean Pataliputra, Patna. I mean Bihar Museum is an amazing collection. Then go to Vaishali, and then Kesaria, number 5, and then we go to Lumbini, I mean Kushinagar, and then Lumbini, and after Lumbini go to the Nepalese part of Kapilavastu, and then to Indian Pipiora, which is the Indian part of Kapilavastu, and end the journey at Sravasti. And one can actually extend it till Sarnath to complete the whole journey. So this journey, I feel that would give you a kind of a sequential way of experiencing all these places, and also enacting the respect for Buddhism, and engaging the local people in the process. So in Bodh Gaya, the very interesting part is what we heard now, that we have this big temple, which is a present temple there, but this was not the original temple. Original temple on the middle slide shows the Bharut example, Bharut sculptures of this whole Ashokan temple built below the Bodhi tree. So this is very interesting. In fact, when Cunningham actually excavated the Bodh Gaya, he actually discovered this particular temple, which is still there, including the seat of the Vajrasana is there, and then whole thing is very meticulously restored. And in fact, like after the enlightenment, Buddha spent 7 weeks around the this Bodhi tree, and those journey also needs to be identified, and it has been restored. There is a pathway on the northern side of the temple. So there are a lot of micro images, micro stations, micro sculptures, which has been still there and discovered and identified, and the pilgrim or the visitor should be able to see them. And then to connect this Buddhism with the community, when in the Jetian village, King Bimbisara came and received Buddha to take him this 14-kilometer route to Rajgir to Venuvana. And so this is thing we requested the Light of Buddha Dharma Foundation, that these monks are coming from all over the world. Why not they don't actually experience this journey? So this has been happening for last more than 10 years. And from 2nd of December till 12th of December, the monks will be chanting at Bodh Gaya. And then on 13th December, this many of these monks, more than 1,000 of them, actually take this walk. So our journey will also experience, and in the Jethian village, people actually given vikha from every household. So that is a very exciting thing for the Buddhist monk from across the world to actually experience the contribution of the villagers, which is along the journey. And then once we reach Benuvana, the Rajgir, it also have amazing collections of the art form, like on the center beside the Gridhakut or the Vulture's Peak, we have this painting of there's a elephant who's been which attacked Buddha, Nalagiri. It has been painted in Ajanta cave painting, and you can see also on the right side image on this. On the Gandhara sculpture, you can see how Buddha is taming the elephant. So there are various images and art form. In fact, the Rajagriha actually have a wall, fort wall, old city, and many monuments. In fact, the first collection of the Buddhist thing happened at Saptaparni cave. So that is also there. So if you really look and study Rajgir as from the ancient memory, you can actually identify many of these art form, many of this actual spot, and connect it with the Buddha's life. And eventually you need to reach Nalanda, and definitely Nalanda is very highly excavated and highly researched document, and the archaeological document is available. In fact, the Nalanda needs to be excavated much more, so that you can, and Nalanda also has a very nice museum. Both are archaeological site. So definitely in a journey to understand the Buddhist education, the university, the Nalanda, and in Nalanda, near Nalanda, there is a Yuan Sang memorial also is there. So one can see his journey and his contribution to this whole rediscovering process. And then we pass through Patna, Pataliputra. The Bihar Museum has a special Buddha gallery, and we are planning that to understand the art form, because it has got a Buddha statues collected from various era, mostly the Pala era, Pala dynasty, and so this gallery is really orient the visitor about how to look at this statue, how to understand the statue and everything. And then we reach towards north, Vaishali. Vaishali, I'm showing you this Cunningham's excavation reports, where this Ananda stupa has been excavated, and also this pond is also been discovered. And also you can see on the right, and monkey giving honey to Buddha is also in which happened. And in fact, the lion's pillar is also depicting that incident. And here you can see this sculpture, of depicting that story. So in fact, Vaishali is very important, because also one of the relic stupa which we showed you earlier is there. And so it is becoming more and more excavation is happening, and Vaishali actually present, and also the first women, the Buddhist women organization, where he converted with his 500 women. And also Amrapali is a very unique character who was ordained by Buddha, and so they have got their footprint in Vaishali. So Vaishali also needs to be understood through all these stories and this kind of relics. And then we come across Kesaria, where when the Buddha decided in Vaishali that he's going to go for Mahaparinirvana, So people of Lichavi, people from Vaishali was following him, and he ultimately make them agree to take his bowl and alm bowl, and then the people of Lichavi of Vaishali built one of the biggest stupa there, which is later on the slide on the right is the Borobudur. Later, the first time this design has been evolved from Kesaria and a few other stupas around it, the whole design of Borobudur happened. And then we reach Kushinagar, where is already been explained that how the Kushinagar city has been there, and there are 8 monarchies came, and they wanted the part of the thing. But if you look at the map of the Kushinagar, you can see there's Mr. Cunningham's excavation is very thoroughly done, and his temple has been there, and his Buddha's place where he was cremated is also there. So Kushinagar has got many footprints which need to be connected and explained to the visitor. And this is Lumbini, where the main temple which I showed you earlier also is there. The original temple has been discovered and is very beautifully excavated and documented. And also you have the Ashokan pillar showing that, and also Mayadevi's sculpture after giving birth to Buddha. So Lumbini has also we have got many landscaped, and very one could easily spend few days at Lumbini to understand and observe this greatness of that place. And then we come to the Indian Kapila Vastu is actually called Piprava. And here you can see that how Buddha was living. And so Kapila Vastu, people feel that is a much bigger territory which includes, and here in Kapila Vastu in Indian Pipara, one found another relic of Buddha there. So which makes it a very prominent place for us. And then you go to the Kapila Vastu of the Nepal, the Dilaur, which is actually the place you can see that the eastern gate where from Buddha actually snaked away from the main city, and the old city has been excavated very beautifully by various agencies. And if once you cross this old wall, there is also a stupa of his horse, who are very upset because Buddha was living. So they have got in this Kapila Vastu of Nepal, Trilaukot is amazing, and it has so many footprint. You can spend a lot of time, and also pre-Buddhist tribal images are also there where one can experience that. And ultimately we come to Sravasti. You can see the central figure. Buddha is performing miracle. And also the Jethavana, where Buddha spent 24 rainy season, and it has been expressed in various medallion and various sculptures across the Buddhist monuments, where this particular one is very unique, where you can see his home or 24 rainy season he spent there. And you can see the floor has been also covered with the gold coin, so that the Anath Pindu could buy the garden and give it to Buddha. So Sravasti has amazing footprints, and you can see that in cave number 1 of Ajanta, the Sravasti miracle is been depicted on the left side image, and also on the right side you can see the original Sravasti town, and it's called Sehet and Mehet. The Sehet is where the Jethavana is there on the bottom left of the. You can see that Mehet is the actual world's fortified city next to the river. So what happened that if you actually go through this whole process of all these documents and art forms, and it is a vast treasure, and then your journey becomes much more important and very unique, and you can connect yourself with the Buddha's life in a very unique way.
Thanks so much for this, Devashish. This is really a snapshot of the tour that Devashish and Uniglobe are conducting starting the 11th of December. We are often asked when we do our virtual tours, why don't we get into actually doing tours on the ground? So we thought we'd experiment with this one and see what the interest is from our viewers to actually join us on an event like this. So if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. And of course, for any details, if you're interested in being part of this tour starting on the 11th of December, all you have to do is drop in a line and we will connect you and get you all the details of the itinerary. So, Devashish, I'm going to ask you a question that I've been wanting to ask you. I know you went with Nina to do the recce of this place recently. What did you find over there? How is the journey been? Had you done this journey before, or was it the first time that you were doing it?
No, I've been going to Bodh Gaya for last 20 years, but somehow I never been to this journey. I thought I have to do it. And it is very comfortable, very pious, and people are very respectful. So I think it is worth going. And and physically, in Sravasti, there is a Sri Lankan monastery. So in the monastery, inside the monastery, you discovered all the miracles have been done in a painting format, which is amazing. So there are so many things. Once you go there, you can discover.
I've just come back from Varanasi, and of course, Sarnath is such a wonderful site over there. Couldn't help but go back over there, Kurush. And it's amazing how, Varanasi is this crowded, crazy place. But Sarnath is this peaceful place with large roads, long avenues, etc. And it's very beautifully maintained. So it's great that it is done so well. But we still know so little, right, about these cities. And that's what amazes me, because even Varanasi, what we see of Varanasi is the southern part of Varanasi, but the actual site of Varanasi, which is one of the oldest living cities in the world, was up north in Rajghat. And when you see the map of Varanasi and where Sarnath is, there's a small bridge connecting the Rajghat area with Sarnath. So our perspective is completely warped. Actually, we're looking to the south when we should be looking to the north.
So I completely agree with you. In fact, the excavations that were carried out, which established Varanasi, were actually carried out by the BHU on the BHU's premises. And that was the one area where they could excavate, where Varanasi had not taken over, all the available land. And that's when they reached the conclusion that this is where the main city was. And then it makes sense because, it's just across the river from there is where Sarnath is. So then the link between Kashi and Sarnath becomes so much more obvious. And there's such a beautiful Archaeological Survey of India museum at Sarnath, in which the actual four-lion capital sits right as you enter inside. It's such a spectacular museum. And yes, it is truly such a beautiful place. And, away from the bustle and the filth and the sound of Kashi, and then you have this oasis of calm. It's as though the Buddha, changed the very dynamics of the place.
Right. I know it predates the Buddha, but I have to iterate that wheel, the size of that wheel, which was on that on the lion pillar, it's unimaginable. When I stood there and saw it, I was just awestruck, because you could never think of a wheel that big, and all you could think of was what it would have looked like in its prime when it was standing out there. What a beautiful sight it would be. So this is a tour that I would have also loved to be on, Devashish. So next time I'm going to join you, not this time, because I'm in another part of the country shooting at that time. But nonetheless, for all of you who want to be part of this tour, do join in, because there's nothing like going to these places with the experts and seeing it. And that's what Live History India has tried to do, to really connect you with places, with historians, with authors, with all the people who are doing the most cutting edge, most interesting research on our history, so that we can make it all come alive. So thank you so much for joining us today. And Devashish and Kurush, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.